G'day folks, how you going? This is Lethal Mullet, Adam O'Brien, and we are back for another episode of Lethal Mullet Podcast on Phantom Podcast Network. The one place where you're going to find all your retro 80s action fun into the 90s and into the noughties. And tonight we're looking at the Peter Yates film, starring Ken Marshall, the amazing and greatest space fantasy of its day, Krull. That's right, Krull. Even though considered a box office turkey, this film is a cult classic. We talk it today here on the Lethal Mullet Podcast. Welcome to Phantom Podcast Network. This is Lethal Mullet Podcast, a celebration of 1980s action cinema. Celebrating the heroes of yesterday: Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Bruce Willis, Van Damme, all the way down to, of course, the B-grade action films that we all enjoyed on VHS, and of course Betamax. From those of American Ninja all the way through to Cyborg, Cop and beyond. Here at Phantom Podcast Network's Lethal Mullet Podcast, join Adam O'Brien as we celebrate action movie cinema.
G'day, mate. How you going? Welcome to the one and the only Lethal Mullet Podcast on FPN. And just for Kevin Wrightsall, he's always said, hey, can you turn up the Aussie to 5? Or maybe even 10? And guess what? We're going to do that right now for you. As an Aussie would be in Brisbane, in Australia, here we are. Welcome to Lethal Mullet Podcast. He's sitting down the pub and ready to go down with Kyle Wagner, all the way from Florida in the United States of America. Mate, there you go.
Are you sure that was Aussie, or was that just some auctioneer? I got a 5 over here, I got a 5 over there, I got a 5 over here, I got to get 10 over there, I got a 5 over here, I got 5, and sold!
You know, with the funny thing is...
Big funny looking bald guy in the back. Right there, you.
Yeah, the one with the fake mullet. But yeah, that is something very akin to Aussies. You know, Aussies, when you go into the cities, they talk fast, you know, because life is fast in the city. So, g'day, mate, how you going, mate, how you going? But yet, as you go out towards Alice Springs, out into the outback, it slows down. G'day, mate, how you going, mate? Hey, Kyle, how you going, mate?
Let me get my iPhone with this new translator app. That's all I'm saying.
Now, folks, I've got to...
She'll be like, we're sorry, we cannot translate this.
And boy, do we have a 1983 classic for you. This film is better than any 1980s fantasy film, and I do love Willow, but this is edging the competition a little bit better. This is Krull, folks, the Peter Yates film. We're going to be looking at that today, and of course, this is a classic. Is it not, Kyle?
Oh, this film is one of my all-time personal favorites. It's one I'll revisit at least once every couple of years. Some of the things I just remember when this movie came out, everybody fell in love with obviously Lee Glaive, and that's what everybody remembers from Krull. But you know what? One of the things that remember being really attracted in me wanting to see this movie is back in the day here in the States, Leonard Nimoy hosted a show on Nickelodeon called Lights, Camera, Action, and they did a whole thing of probably about 20 minutes on Krull, especially everything with the Clydesdales. And
the Fire Mars.
Yeah, the Fire Mars. And they talked about that, and then you saw the makeup for the Cyclops and everything like that, and it just looked so cool. And I actually saw Krull in the theaters, and it just stands out to me because it had a little bit of a uniqueness to it, because it really did feel like it was mixing fantasy with science fiction. And I think that's really the first movie I remember can remember seeing where it mixed really both together like that. That obviously there's been a lot of movies since then, but that was the kind of my first experience of mixing fantasy and science fiction.
And it's a real heady mix, unlike, I suppose, Star Wars, which it kind of takes more of a sci-fi angle, if that makes sense, in space fantasy. But this really pushes up the fantasy angle and gives it kind of, I think, a little bit more of an Errol Flynn vibe when it comes to the action.
And that's what I mean when I say fantasy. It's when somebody says, "Oh, you read this fantasy novel" or something like that. It's the elements that come to your mind about that. So you had the fantasy elements with how the planet was, but then you had the science fiction elements with everything with the monster and the slayers and everything like that. So it was a very interesting mix at the time. And you know, there's elements of this movie that still hold up very well to this day.
Oh, really, but it does. I mean, a lot of the location work on this is fantastic. I mean, I think it's a beautifully shot film, which we'll go into. The music alone, James Horner, can you get better? It's funny, Mr. Horner has not only given us great Star Trek, Aliens, Avatar, Titanic, but he's also given us this music plus Willow, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, Horner's one of the all-time greats, without a doubt here. But I think one of the things too that I remember about this movie is the aspect of it was so cool to start with, and it's the one knock I have on this movie, the ending.
Yes.
The ending of this film, it felt like they just kind of ran out of money right at the end. ending of this filming, and what I'm mainly getting to is the fact that there's this fire effect, and it's just bad. It's just really bad, and the aspect of the actual creature that they are fighting in it, it's one of the worst effects of the film, because it's like this weird video effect, and it doesn't work because the creature came off so cool because it was morphing into different looks and some of the actors and stuff like that all through the movie, so you really didn't quite know what it looks like. And then when you finally see it, and it's like this weird screen effect, and I was like, okay, this movie has so much cool stuff, and then it's like, what, did they just run out of money at that point?
And you think about it too, what's funny about that is that I look at what Peter Yates was putting together by that stage. So we've obviously got some interesting visuals through the film, different locations, a lot of great sets, right? Particularly in the middle of the film, right? In the swamps and stuff like that. But what's interesting is it's almost at the end where Yates has just gone, you know what, I've got no idea. Let's use the glaive as kind of like a drone, and we'll just use a remote control and just have it fly around, yeah? And, we know the creator of the fidget spinner just went, yeah, mate, it's a great idea. Let's just make something smooth and round like that, and we can spin it. Fidget spinner.
Yeah. What's interesting too is this movie, like I said, you talked about the effects. To me, this still has one of the best Cyclops makeups I've ever seen. Bernard Bresslaw, who played the Cyclops, but it was so outstanding and so well done. I can think of very few movies that have given me a Cyclops effect as good as this one has.
It's really well done. Again, the makeups in general just are very, very good. The sets we've talked about, we'll get into that a little bit further soon. But also just the look, the clothing, the costumes in this are quite well done. It's a little bit over the top kind of Renaissance medieval period sort of look. And I think it's something that was done very much in the 60s to 70s with Robin Hood and all that sort of stuff that we saw, right back to probably the 30s as well. We'll get into all that very, very soon here, folks, but we do have to let you know how you can catch this channel and, of course, this show.
The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is...
G'day, man, how you going? Follow the Lethal Mullet here on Fandom Podcast Network's master channel at fpnet.podbean.com, or subscribe on the Podbean app, where you can find all the shows. Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast. Culture Clash, a weekly look at pop culture. You look at Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast. You can also check out the Mullet Guild, a look at the Dune universe from me, the Lethal Mullet. You can also check out this show and all the others like What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, and much, much more. All on FPN. You can follow on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all podcatchers. Make sure you follow me, the Lethal Mullet, at The Lethal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
I'm sitting here waiting, contemplating what's the best day. Watching that movie, I'm the Lethal Mullet. Wow, I'm the leader. Wow, I'm the leader. Oh, I'm the leader. Mullet.
You can catch it on fpnet.podbean.com. That's right, the place to check out Fandom Podcast Network on Podbean. Also, download the app, Google Play, and of course, the App Store, where you'll find this. You can then subscribe to it on there. That we'll find, of course, Lethal Mullet Podcast, the Mullet Guild, the June podcast. You'll also find Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast. And, of course, you might find Culture Clash there too. Right, Kyle?
Well, yeah, but you got a new place to find Culture Clash too, because the Fandom Podcast Network is also now on YouTube, and we have taken Culture Clash live on YouTube. We still put out the audio as a podcast, but if you want to watch it live, see how crazy Kevin and I can really get, that's the place to go. Of course, we also exclusively have on the YouTube channel, we have the End Zone, which is our professional football show for here in the States. We also have done a couple live couch potato theaters. We got some other exclusive stuff we're working on planned for the channel as well, but definitely go check out the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel and subscribe and give the videos a like. We always
That's right. And if you folks out there, I would love you to jump on there and particularly get involved in the community, chat to Kevin and Kyle and remind Kevin that the real champions are the Chiefs.
Yeah, for this year. I'm hoping for many years to come.
Great.
But, you know.
Actually, that's right. Hey, look, folks, we are definitely going to educate our brothers over there in the US on professional football, which is, of course, without the shoulder pads.
And those careers last, what, two years, and then the concussions kick in. It explains so much why people are the way they are in Australia.
Here's a question. With American football, what is the oldest most players get to? Like, what's the most senior age?
Well, I think the oldest player in the league right now is actually Tom Brady at 43.
43, there you go.
Yeah, so, well, he's a quarterback, too. They're really protected.
Yeah, most of our guys are gone by about 35 because of injury.
35. If you've hit 35 in American football, you're doing pretty well. Usually, it kind of depends on the position you play as well.
Wow. I mean, we call them fullbacks out here. I don't know if you've got fullbacks in that game.
Oh, yeah, we got fullbacks. They don't last long.
No. Do you have wingers?
No wingers. We have wide receivers, but no wingers.
Yeah, and you guys are allowed to forward pass, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one thing you're not allowed in rugby league. You forward pass, it's an automatic scrum. And basically, that's our chance to butt heads and smash in. And back in the day, scrums, you could throw the ball in the middle, right? And the scrums would use the legs to kick out the ball to the opposition or to their own team, right? But now that it's just literally ceremonial, and they just smash each other in the head anyway, and we just feed the ball to your own team. Now it's time for the latest action news from the cinema and martial arts movies and more, all here on the Lethal Mullet Podcast. All right, so lots of news going on right now. There's some interesting stuff Keanu Reeves is up to. He's got his own comic coming out, which is going to be great. And of course, we've got Bill and Ted's Face the Music out there. Still not in Australia yet, folks. No, they've had it in the US, but not Australia. So we don't know what it's like yet, because we're getting a theatrical release.
Well, we got a theatrical release here in the States. I've been to the movie theater a few times. But, too, if you want to know about Bill and Ted, we also on our YouTube channel, Kevin and I did a live watch party of Bill and Ted's Face the Music. We had a lot of fun with that. It's a great final story for Bill and Ted in a way. And it's a great film that they could easily do more with that world. Too. They set up a lot of things.
Nice. And of course, all the main characters are back from what I...
Oh, yes. Pretty much everybody who was involved as a character in the first two Bill and Ted films is back. It's a very enjoyable film. I don't want to give too many spoilers away for the people who haven't got a chance to see it yet, but it is a very enjoyable.
And I have a question from our listeners over in England. Hey, Kyle, have you seen Tenet?
I have seen Tenet.
Do you think Tenet's good, yeah?
I think the basis of Tenet is good. I think James David Washington is absolutely phenomenal in the film. I think actually Robert Pattinson is very good in the film. However, I think it's a Christopher Nolan trap where, I've said this on a few other places, that he has a little M. Night Shyamalan disease. He's too caught up in his own gimmick.
This is exactly what I've been saying. Yeah.
In Christopher Nolan's case, he makes excellent films, but you hit a point where it's like, unless you have a physics degree and probably several other scientific degrees, you're not going to get what the heck is going on, and you just kind of ignore it and go for the ride. But yeah, Nolan's kind of falling into his own trap here. So I'm hoping maybe after this film, because I know it's not met, even with COVID and everything, the expectations they had for it. So I'm hoping maybe it's a little bit of a back check for Christopher Nolan and say maybe I need to change things up here just a little bit on how I approach things. But again, I will say that it is a star-making movie for James David Washington without a doubt. The movie is worth going to see for his performance, and he has excellent chemistry with Robert Pattinson in this film as well. Of course, Pattinson is going to be Batman here in the summer of 2021.
And I think you've nailed exactly what I've always suspected anyway with Christopher Nolan, is that he makes fantastic films, very polished, well done films. Usually when it's cinematography by William. Was it Will Pfister, if I remember? He did all the Batman ones. Really, really talented cinematographer. But I will say is he doesn't understand his audience. And so what he does is he usually goes, my audience is dumb. So what I'm going to do is explain every moment so they understand before it happens. And that's what he does. He literally will set something up with high-tech or at least a high-end plot twist. And then he goes and does it. And the thing is, he doesn't know how to explain that visually quickly, because you look at the older films, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm talking about ones that are sort of adventure but smart and clever, things like that. Even the Bond ones, they explained it quickly visually, so you got it like that, and then you got in and enjoyed it. But I find a lot of people coming out of the cinema going, "What did I just watch?" Like, yeah, okay, there's a twist, but the payoff is that the time travel and a few other things isn't properly explained. And I think he's trying to be too clever.
Yeah, I like I said, he's I think he's a little bit lost in his own trick at the moment. But it's the thing about his films, and you can go across the board, they're always incredibly well acted, and I think that's the big thing.
It was great in those sort of parts. Now, big news is Scott Adkins is super busy. This boy, if he's not doing work in his action films, he's working on The Art of Action. Now, this is a great show on YouTube, and if you haven't seen it, I think it runs about an hour for each episode, from what I remember. The last episode aired yesterday, and it is Jeff Speakman, of course, Kempo Karate legend. And there's a few things that we brought up here on Lethal Mullet podcast a few months back about Perfect Weapon. So you sort of found out some of the reasons why his career didn't take off with Paramount Pictures as it was meant to. And of course, one of those was his next film was going to be Speed, and it was even filmed almost. They had everything going. The script, they were hiring martial artists to get in there, and it was to the point where even the film itself would have had points where he jumps off the bus and then does his karate kempo stuff and then jumps back on. So everything was actually getting organised, but there was a change of regime at Paramount.
Well, I think it helped Keanu Reeves in greatly. Just speak, but not so much. I actually have a piece of news for you, though, Mr. Mullet. Netflix has announced they are in development of a live-action Conan the Barbarian series.
Arnold, I hope you're in this.
I don't know about that. I think Arnold maybe as a guest appearance, maybe as another older character or something like that. But yeah, it was announced today. There's not a whole lot of information on it yet, but Netflix always looking for IPs. Conan the Barbarian live action series.
It'll probably be Conandra. It's probably going to be changing the orientation of the character.
Well, they have that. It's called Red Sonja.
Yeah, I know. Be interesting to see who they get for the role. I'd probably go with John Cena.
Season's going to be a little busy. He's got his own HBO show coming out here.
Yes, he does. Yes, and I think Peacemaker will be interesting.
No. Let's get the title right. It's bleeping Peacemaker.
And let's get the gun right. He's got a freaking Desert Eagle in there, and he's called the Peacemaker. Come on. 45 long cold. I mean, just ask our dear pal on YouTube. Hickok 45 here. This guy's great. And, of course, he is a legend when it comes to the 45. So there you go, folks. Some Aussies do know their guns. Yes.
I will say this. He wouldn't come back to do it at this point, but I think the Jason Momoa Conan movie is highly underrated.
Great bad guy too in that, Stephen Lang.
So, I would love to see him come back and reprise the role. I don't think he'll do it at this point, but I do think the Momoa Conan is highly underrated.
I think it's very much visually, anyway, reminded me more of that sort of mid to late Dark Horse run in the early 2000s of Conan when they took over the license, and it's actually quite a fun role, like for him. I think it's got the lightheartedness, but at the same time, got the Hyborian edge.
Yeah, there you go.
That's great. So getting back quickly to Adkins, obviously he's done some. He's had Lauren Avedon on there. Actually, Lauren invited us on his new page too. So big shout out to the King of the Kickboxers, and of course he never retreats and he never surrenders, folks. That's right. So go and check that out. Also, we have been following Cynthia Rothrock of late, and I tell you what, folks, she doesn't look one day older than 40, and she's 60 something now. I'll tell you what. It just shows you what fitness can do for you. Also, in amongst all of that, Mark Dacascos, folks, definitely going to be doing more with him, with Lee soon, once we can align the stars. But again, always liking the posts that we're putting out there too. And I picked up Double Dragon. Now, I do believe Kyle said it's his favourite film from the 90s and his favourite computer game, so he's going to be on that show soon.
Yeah. I said, now you want to give me a little original Mortal Kombat film? I'm there. Double Dragon, unless you are officially having Alyssa Milano co-host sitting next to me, yeah, not gonna happen. In your mullet dreams, my friend.
Nice. And with that, we're heading into the pub, folks, here on the Little Mullet Podcast. Alrighty, mate. Time to go down to the pub for a pint, chat, action movies and more. Here. Alright, folks, welcome to the pub. Here, chicken out. Oh, look, there you go. There goes a lager. There goes a rumskis. There goes a bourbon. Here we are, chilling back, taking it easy, and chatting some 1983 fantasy. This film came out at a time when we had Tron out in the cinemas. We had E.T., Phone Home, folks, all that stuff out there. We had The Thing, which was the best film of that year, apart from Blade Runner. Some great stuff. And one of the great things, I think, is that it is brilliant, is that we've got some really good films that sort of came out in the wake of it, not just Krull, but I think Krull really nailed that time's fantasy. I saw this on TV first, believe it or not, in about 85, 86. Oh, when did you see it?
I actually saw it in the theaters in '83. I went. I remember the trailer for it well because they put the glaive as a big focus of the trailer. So me and my friends were like, "Oh, we got to go see this with this awesome weapon in it." So I actually saw it in the theaters, and it was one of those movies that on cable here in the States when it hit that round, like HBO and things like that. It was recorded, put on VHS, and watched many a time.
Oh, it's great. It's one of those films that just continues, I think, to this day to be rewatchable. Directed by Peter Yates and written by Stanford Sherman. Now, these are guys that were very experienced in the British tradition out there. It starred Ken Marshall as Prince Colwyn, Lisette Anthony, big name, from playing Princess Lisa. Sounds a bit like Leia, doesn't it? Trevor Martin as the Beast, Freddie Jones. That's right, Freddie Jones to June fans. You'll know this guy as Ynir. Bernard Bresslaw as Rel the Cyclops. David Batley as Ergo the Magnificent. The great character. Actually, that's one of the better characters in the film. Tony Church and Bernard Archer as the Kings. And Alan Armstrong as the leader of the group of bandits. And, of course, he's the one that gets his head mashed in Braveheart.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't forget, you got a couple other people you need to mention in here.
Robbie Coltrane, Liam Neeson, John Welsh, and Graham McGrath.
I think this was the first film American fans got exposed to Liam Neeson.
And the widow of the web, of course, the one, the only, Francesca Annis, Benny Gesserit's sister, and of course, the Lady Jessica of Dune, only a year later.
Yeah. She was a little busy.
tad little bit busy. Obviously, shot the UK, folks. It was a bit of a, as they say, a turkey. The shoot was good, but it was a bit of a turkey when it came to the box office itself. But it's a cult film.
Yeah, it's definitely a cult film, but let's talk about that for a minute, because not only was it was a turkey, it did not do well in the theaters, but this motion picture was also one of the most expensively produced of its time. So
It's huge.
this movie had a ton of money put into it, and yes, it was one of those films that I think came out at the wrong time, but it tanked at the box office. But definitely HBO, VHS, things like that really kind of cemented its place into the cult of fandom.
Please hang up and try again.
Now it's time for the Lethal Mullet Cafe as we chill back, relax, and look at the trivia, all the detail, the nitty-gritty of the films we are celebrating.
That's right. Now, when this starts, there is a narrator that says, "A girl of ancient name that shall become queen, that she shall choose a king, and that together they shall rule their world, and that their son shall ruleth that galaxy." And of course, with that, we are drawn into this wild world, which is kind of, I think at the end of the day, it looks fantastical straight away. It kind of looks like the never-ending story mixed with Lord of the Rings, and even then, a little bit more drastic.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Again, when we talked about at the beginning of the show, this is where we start seeing like the fantasy realm with castles and swords and some sorcery kind of things. But we also get the science fiction of everything with the beast and his slayers, because the slayers, yes, while they had a sword, they also had a kind of like a projectile energy weapon. It was actually like a little bit of a blade, but it had an energy look to it. And obviously just the look of the slayers, a little bit of a demon-y, science fiction-y kind of space look to them. Obviously the creature flew in his castle through the vastness of space, coming upon planets to take over. So yeah, it got an interesting balance in this. And I mean, that's kind of thing. When you look at this movie too, Ken Marshall, who plays the lead of Coleman, this was the only film he ever had top billing on. This was his only really starring role, and it kind of surprised me because I always kind of felt like he had a little bit of an Errol Flynn feel to him.
Yeah, I think he's a natural when it comes to the camera. Like the camera likes him, you know. I think you're drawn into his performance. It's an honest performance, but kind of like Kyle MacLachlan, a bit of a yeoman's performance.
Yeah, I would say that's very much the case there. But I mean, Ken Marshall also went on to do some DS9, which in the Star Trek realm, which a lot of people know him from there for. But yeah, this was just a very interesting cast, and I give him a lot of credit. There was some real interesting dynamics to this world that they built.
It really is. It's interesting because I think what they do in this one is that they each time they go to a new location, not only are you building the world of Krull, you know, through what you see, but you're also getting it through the people that you meet along the way. It's a hero's journey. It's a classic mythological adventure, but going through that, it's also a character building one as we meet the different people as we go along. The main thrust of this, folks, is the planet Krull is invaded by the Beast. That's all they call him, the Beast, and he has an army of slayers. As Kyle mentioned, these are guys with a head. Basically, it's like a lance which shoots out a blast, a purple blast of energy, laser sort of stuff. And they have landed on the planet Krull, and they are going to kill and invade everything. So it's called the Black Fortress. This weird sort of, it's kind of like an organic ship. It's kind of like, from what I gather, the Black Fortress is the Beast.
Yeah, that's I guess part of him. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because the outside has this kind of dark, rocky look to it, but you go inside and it's almost like skeletal a little bit on the inside of it. And it's like, especially in the main Beast lair, it just has this really kind of trippy look to it, where there's points where you see once she's captured Lissa, played by Lysette Anthony, and she's wandering the castle, it's just got a weird vibe to it. There's points where she's like, it looks like she's standing on a hand, and she's looking over a thing that's an eyeball. It's it's kind of a bit of it's a mind trip with what they set up with the Black Fortress and the Beast Lair.
It really is. Don't get smashed off your brains and watch this one, particularly the ending, folks, because it does things to your head.
Yeah,
Put it that way.
they built 23 different sets for this film.
That's right. On a budget of about $30 million, unfortunately, the box office only made 16 back. So you can see why it's a bit of a turkey shoot when it comes to that one too. Obviously, the big part of Krull is that we have two warring factions, basically two royal families that are in battle to each other, but they basically have the princess and the prince of those families coming together to get married. And this is going to seal the breach or seal the union so that they become one and become stronger for it. It's a little bit like June, folks. I hate to say, Paul Atreides, and of course, set up to marry the Carino family in that story. So, do they steal that story? I don't know. But basically, the Black Fortress is the big element that they have to come across. But what happens is the invasion happens at the same time as the union, just after the wedding, and they absolutely decimate both families, leaving only Ynir and, of course, Prince Colwyn.
Yeah, and Ynir actually shows up after the battle and finds Prince Colwyn. So,
yeah, so Ynir, where the hell were you? At the pub checking out, the Broads, where you're just chilling back with that Mayors with the green wizard's outfit? Who knows what was going on? But Ynir, you let the team down. But of course, here's the Obi-Wan Kenobi like Gandalf character of this story. Very much like the role he played also in Dune, as, of course, Thufir Hawat, the Mentat assassin leader of course, House Atreides. So there's a lot of Dune influence on this. A lot of people must have just got plucked up by David Lynch. All right, I've got an idea. Let's just get these guys from Krull. And of course, that may have happened. But anyway, the main thing is that Prince Colwyn survives. Ynir brings him back from the brink and heals him and takes him on a quest to find the weapon that he's going to need to take out the Black Fortress and, of course, the beast. The glaive, a mythical, unstoppable weapon, which is just a giant fidget spinner, basically. And through that, he also meets a group of characters, which we're going to go through very soon with this casting list, which is just huge. Through that, he becomes stronger, becomes the real king, the true king, through his quest. And that is the story.
Yeah. It's a basic story, but again, they put some interesting twists on it. And I think they had, what you found was that they had fun with the story. They created some. I think they created. There's a few characters that to this day stand out from Krull. I mean, obviously you have Ken Marshall, you have Lisette Anthony, but Freddie Jones stands out. Alan Armstrong, who played Torquil, is probably to me one of the characters that stands out the most in this film, and along with the great David Batley, who played Ergo.
Oh, look, Ergo is just fantastic. Let's go through a bit of the list. Obviously, we talked about Ken Marshall. I think great. And if you go on YouTube, search 30 years Krull glaive Ken Marshall, you'll see him reunited with the glaive only about 3 or 4 years ago.
Very cool. I'll have to go check that out.
The flick blade version, it's all there. And he even has a moment because he's there for an event and he picks up the thing he's like. But when it's a bit nostalgia. He's looking at this thing. He hasn't seen it for whatever it is, 35 years or whatever. It's a true moment. You can see everything else is washed out from his eyes, and he's just looking and he goes, wow, like this is it. This is the thing that made him famous. Lisette Anthony, obviously she's great in this, is playing Princess Leia. Lisa, sorry, there you go, Leia. But she was actually dubbed by an American actress by the name of Lindsay Krause, as they wanted to have a much more mature sounding lady than her too. Trevor Martin as the voice of the Beast. I don't know Trevor Martin, but I think the voice was quite well done. Like it was,
for what it was.
Yeah. Freddie Jones as Ynir, the old one, the film's narrator. What do we think of him?
I thought it's Freddie Jones. I mean, and he was great in this film, and I think he brought the presence that you wanted for this kind of movie. And he's done so much, and he just recently passed away in 2019. So, but I mean, you just go through his IMDb and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So, But yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, I think Krull was their introduction to Freddie Jones, especially people of our age.
Oh, definitely. Look, I think one of the great things about Freddie Jones for me was that obviously being in these classic films, but he always drew you in with explanation of what was happening, and you got an idea. But of course, nothing beats when he gets really ticked off in Dune. He goes, "We're finding them too easily." Some great scenes. David Batley as Ergo the Magnificent. And obviously, his comedic genius. And in this, very well done when it comes to getting all those sorts of things set out. I think he was a British actor who was just turned up in a lot of TV, but also a lot of movies aimed at the adolescent market too.
Yeah, he was phenomenal in this film. His character of Ergo really stands out. They do some very creative things, and I got to admit, the changeling effects weren't that bad considering it was '83 when they did these.
That's right. He describes himself as short in stature, tall in power, narrow of purpose, and wide of vision.
Yeah, he was definitely your over-the-top, egotistical character who had a thing for pie.
Yeah, he did too. Now, Bernard Bresslaw played Rel. As we mentioned, the makeup on the Cyclops of Rel is just brilliant. But I loved the foresight that he had. Now, the big part of the Cyclops in this is that they can see their death.
Yeah, that was their curse. They were given the vision to see their future, but the only thing by the beast, but the only thing that they were able to see was their own death.
That's right. And of course, you can imagine trying to see through the one eye. It would be a little bit hard to do those fight scenes too. Now, here's a great one.
No, actually, real quick. One other thing about Bernard Bresslaw on this character, he was 6'7", and he still wore lifts to get him over 7 foot at his own insistence.
Nice. I heard that, like you get those sorts of things. You think about you can't see right, and then because of the limitations of the appliance, but then you've got to try and walk on your tiptoes as well.
Yeah.
My God.
No, thank you.
That's something. Alan Armstrong as Torkel. Man, it obviously uses accent and has that leader of he's a leader, of the bandits, and that's when it really kicks up, folks, because it's really well done. Liam Neeson in his second great performance after Excalibur, and also we have, of course, Robbie Coltrane, the fantastic Nuns on the Run, Robbie Coltrane, and of course of Goldeneye, and of course of can't remember the other one he was in.
Something about some wizard kids or something like that.
Oh yeah, Harry Potter. If you watch that, folks, yeah, okay. Yeah. But great actor. Also, we got John Walsh as the Emerald Shear. And of course, let's just say Alan Armstrong is in a lot of stuff. And of course, one of those being an amazing Rutger Hauer film we will cover here very, very soon. And I am only going to tell you that it is out in 1992, from what I remember, or 93. But anyway, go and check it out. Look up him and the same film, and you will get a Blade Runner set in the UK. We also have Alan Armstrong in Braveheart. He gets his head mashed in by ball and chain. That's right, by William Wallace. William Wallace called 50 men. 50 as Everett were one. Same guy. We have Graham McGrath as Titch, the Seer's young apprentice. Francesca Annis as the Widow of the Web. Tony Church as King Tyrol. He really looks the part, that guy, actually. Claire McIntyre as Meredith, and Belinda Main as Meredith's assistant. Now, this is an interesting film, which obviously has both an American and British crew, so not just behind the camera, but also writing. And in 1980, Columbia Pictures, Frank Price, pulled together with Ron Silverman, producer, to see if they could come up with something that would be along the lines of a great film. They'd also done, Stanford Sherman had worked on Any Which Way You Can in 1980. That's a great film too.
Yeah. Now, I find this interesting. When Krull came out in '83, it was kind of in the middle of an interesting fantasy push from Hollywood, because not only did you have Krull, but in '81 you had Excalibur, '82 was Beastmaster, and then also in '81 you had Dragon Slayer, and then it really kind of ended probably with like the sword and sorcery fantasy kind of thing. You had a couple other B ones, and then you had Lady Hawk in '85, and it was kind of after Lady Hawk there was a break in these kind of fantasy films. It was like it died out for a while.
Oh yeah, it did. It was great. I mean, the thing is, we're at a time where it was interesting because fantasy was kicking up because of Dungeons and Dragons really getting out
Yeah.
there. And it's interesting. Gary Gygax has stated that, to the best of my knowledge and belief, the producers of Krull never approached TSR for a license to enable their film to use the D&D game IP. So it looks like at the stage there's rumors that they were going to use Krull as the basis for a D&D movie.
Yeah. Well, I also know that Krull really got a lot of video game support. There was an Atari 2600 game. There was a great stand-up coin-op game that was hard
Yeah.
as hell. And trust me, I remember that. I believe they also made a game for the Atari 5200 as well. But yeah, Krull got a lot of hype to it and a lot of money spent on it for a movie that really it bombed very hard. But Adam, we all know what we really wanted was our Glaive toys, which we never got.
Yeah, we never got that. The only thing I've ever seen in Australia, and I've seen it once to my late great friend James Durham, who went to both school and high school with us. He said, "I've got something from Krull." I said, "Oh, what? We'd only watched the movie about a month before on TV, on network TV." And he said, "Yeah, I've got the board game," and it's a real letdown when you see it. All it is literally just the spiral of the actual. It's one of those Parker Brothers ones where it was literally just a map with a spiral. You go to the little beast in the middle, and that's it. And you got little paper cutouts for the figurines, basically, and a little dice. That was it. And that's all they ever produced. And that thing goes for thousands of dollars on eBay, of course, which is just ridiculous. So with that, obviously, you think that there's been a lot of custom figures done of not only Colwyn, but other members of the crew you can see out there too. But yeah, we really needed some merchandise.
Yeah. I think the idea was the hope was maybe Krull could even be kind of a new series of films, because I know there was initial plans to have Krull 2 ready to go if this film did well, and obviously it didn't. The thing about Krull that has made it timeless is obviously the glaive, though, Adam. One of the coolest designed weapons ever made in any film. And you even go to the fact that in the Steven Spielberg adaptation of the book Ready Player One, the glaive is one of the top weapons used within the virtual reality. And it's one of the harder artifacts to get, and it is used in the film, and it's used in a great sequence, and everybody's like, oh my god, he's got the glaive. And so but yeah, that's what made it. The glaive was this really was, for the longest time, Krull was the movie with the glaive in it, and that's how people remembered this film. And it's a simple,
it really was.
It's a simple design, but it just stood out so cool especially with the blades popped out of it, that people just loved it.
I hear that Wesley Snipes liked it so much he went, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's use it on Blade."
His was a little bit more similar to the style of the weapon the Beastmaster had.
Actually, yeah, it was. I think it was less arms on it. It was only like 3 or 4 arms. Yeah, this one's a 5. Yeah,
it's a 5. It's a 5-star. The Beastmasters only had 2, and so did Wesley Snipes. But the Wesley Snipes cut of the blades was very similar to the glaive.
Oh, definitely. Now, there's 2 sets of Slayers in this, if I remember right. There's a black Slayer and a white Slayer that we see in this footage. I do have a friend that I met through podcasting a little while back who actually played one of the Slayers at Pinewood. So a big shout out to Derek. Again, there's just so many people that have probably worked on that film that have worked on all the others that were shot in Pinewood. Now, the action itself was taken as an inspiration, Yates has said, from Captain Blood, the classic, swashbuckling film.
Yeah.
That sort of style.
You could definitely feel that in this film. I want to get back to the Slayers for just a minute, because you talked about the Black Slayers were more of the trooper type Slayers, where the White Slayers, probably the best comparison you can make. They were kind of like the Crimson Guard type. They were in the Beast's Cast fortress. They were in the Black Fortress. They were assigned to that. But the thing I always remember that stood out so much about the Slayers was the fact they had the creature just in the head, and of course the sound they made when they were killed.
Yeah, it's kind of like nails on a chalkboard. It was pretty gruesome, man. Sort of sound. And a lot of that work done by, of course, stop motion animator Steve Archer, who worked in 1981 on The Clash of the Titans.
I'm looking at some trivia here. The dub for the death screams of the Slayers was taken from the Mayar shrieks at the Earth's core.
Oh wow, that's pretty hardcore. Right?
Yeah. So yeah, you had that. We were talking about other Krull merchandise. There was a very cool Krull pinball machine setup as well.
I do remember the Atari one. That's one I do remember. Now, Pinewood's 007 stage was brought through to have the swamp set that we see. So that huge one with the sort of grayed out trees. There's a few through them, and it kind of looks like the Bayou a little bit, but darker. And what's interesting is in this one is that the place was set up with cork chips basically on top of water to give that discolored sort of look. So again, improvising to come up with something that gives it that murky sort of brown color. Because you can imagine just being an actor walking into those scenes going, what's in that water, mate?
Yeah, exactly. There was some interesting choices in this as well. I just want to throw out a fun little fact too. Bernard Bresslaw, who played the Cyclops, was also the giant Gort in the old Hawk the Slayer series.
Oh wow! I still haven't seen that. Still to this day,
Yeah,
have not seen that.
Another fun thing, and I think about this in a way. These two movies feel like they could be a little bit related. The movie's sole screenwriter was Stanford Sherman. He also wrote The Ice Pirates. He was a co-writer on The Ice Pirates, which was another classic oddball 80s film.
It is nuts, that film, and we've got to do that proper here soon, one day, folks. I tell you. Obviously, lots of model work being done. The Black Fortress itself was 12 feet in height, so it's huge, and electrical wiring all the way through it. Obviously, you can see that through just the detail it's done. 40 Slayers were made for the film, and the first 20 made in only 10 days. The Firemares themselves had to leave a trail of flame, and that was put through, obviously, after the footage of Clydesdale horses.
Yeah, and I remember again, they just how, in ways, impressed but terrified of the Clydesdales the actors were, and the thing I had seen with Leonard Nimoy with some behind the scenes, because they're such a powerful horse.
They are, and there's a couple of scenes where you actually see one of them stuntmen film jumping off a cliff but failing to land on top of the horse. It's in the film.
Yeah,
little mistakes there and here. Now, obviously, one of the great ones that worked on this with the London Symphony Orchestra and the Ambrosian Singers is, of course, James Horner. Now, obviously, James is probably known better for Star Trek and obviously Avatar, Titanic. But this soundtrack's no slouch. This is fantastic, this soundtrack. And, the kind of French horns he's using in this echo the classics. There's even a Star Wars feel to some of it. It's really, a lot of people don't realize who he was. I don't know if he was married to her at the time, but it was John Williams' daughter. So there's obviously an influence from the great master in some of his work too. The score itself has been released numerous times on album by different labels all over the place. And so the track listings are all over the shop when it comes to that. But there's a 1998 edition by the look of it that's got a huge amount. It's got 16 tracks. Main titles: The Slayer's Attack, Quest for the Glaive, The Seer's Vision, The Battle in the Swamp, The Quicksand, Leaving the Swamp, The Widow's Web, Colwyn and Lisa, The Widow's Lullaby, Ynira's Dream, Ride of the Firemares, Battle of the Parapets, and Inside the Black Fortress, Death of the Beast. So it's one of those jumbo editions. And again, there's also a 2-disc version you can get as well. So if you want to be fully immersed in it, go and get the LP version.
Yeah, exactly. Can't beat that vinyl sound.
No, that's right. Now let's get to the reception. Let's get to what this film did. And as we mentioned, it's probably not the greatest when it comes to meeting expectations. The critics, failed to see that this was anything more than, as it's said by Variety, a blatantly derivative hodgepodge of Excalibur meets Star Wars.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, that's what it is. I think this movie was too close. This is one of those movies that I think suffered because it was came out too much in the time of Star Wars, and everything was compared to Star Wars at that point. I think if this movie comes out like a little bit more in the later part of the 80s, even the early 90s, I think it does a lot better in the box office.
Yeah, it needed time between them, so people get the maybe Star Wars vision out of their heads a little bit, because you got preconceptions of what sci-fi and fantasy should be,
Yeah.
but not too close to Lord of the Rings, of course, because then they would think, oh no, it needs to be more like Lord of the Rings, and there's much more like that too. Again, they're saying it's a perfectly good film, but just not quite iconic, I think, is the big thing. A common praise, as said here, even on the wiki, is the visuals and the special effects. And as Lambie has said here, quite captivating. Again, you look through here, Entertainment Weekly as well, saying it's the visual imagination is fantastic. Obviously, hugely important was getting those effects right. And they work in spots, but as Kyle mentioned, they ran out of money. It's obvious.
Yeah, there's some great things in here. I mean, there's some that are very dated. The whole spider from the Widow of the Web scene's a little dated. The larger creature work, but again, one of the worst effects in the film is at the beginning of the film when when you have the marriage scene. There's a fire that's taken from water and given to Lisette, or Lissa in this case in the film, and you kind of forget about it. You really do kind of forget about it. And at the end of the film, Cohen loses the glaive while fighting the beast, and he has no weapon. And they hand over this fire back, and they start creating this fire effect that he's using to destroy the beast's energy shots at him. And it's bad. And it's I think that the one aspect of this film that turned a lot of people off, it just felt like an anticlimactic ending. You have this cool weapon that he just loses, and it's just, I think that's where people just felt like, really. People walked away with a kind of a dissatisfying feeling to the end of this film, and I think that's one of the reasons why it struggled in the box office like it did.
Oh, I agree, and that's the hardest part of it. So obviously, too, one thing is there's a lot of criticism of the script itself too, and I've even chatted to fans who think the same. Is that the story sort of goes to little adventure points where they get basically shoved into a corner where they can't get out, and then all of a sudden there's a magical way of getting out. And it maybe is not the best way to get through hurdles in a heroic mythic story, in the classic tradition. But I still think it works personally myself. But that was one of the many things.
Yeah, it's a fun film. This is a popcorn film. You sit back, you enjoy it. But to bring up that point, I've had a lot of people who tell me, "Oh, I watched Krull, just felt like it was somebody's D&D adventure."
Oh yeah, definitely. It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So
this film has quite a few accolades due to the performance of the film. It got nominated for the Best Fantasy Film for Saturn Awards, nominated for Best Music with James Horner for Saturn Awards, and nominated for Best Costumes for Anthony Mandelson for Saturn Awards. But also Grand Prize PD8s for directing the film from Avoria's Fantastic Film Festival, and won Worst Picture for the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards. Surely Steven Seagal's got a few of those.
Probably a nice collection of those. Of course, they might have morphed into the Raspberry Awards, but
Yeah, that's right. Now, there was a novel that was done by the also fantastic and worked on all the others that James Horner did, Alan Dean Foster. And there's also the one thing that I did have that was merch. I had the Marvel comic books adaptation, which now.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, this was a time when Marvel was just doing movie adaptation after movie adaptation after movie adaptation. And it was always, the thing about these movie adaptation comics were the art was always terrible. It was just because they would always show it to the new guys or people who they're just trying out or something like that. Except for some of the Star Wars adaptations, it was always bad art on these movie adaptations.
Oh, big time! Look, I think that's the thing, is that we enjoyed it because of what it was, which was the name.
Yeah.
It was something to take home when we didn't have the VHS and stuff like that to watch. And of course, if you got the DVD that came out in the early 2000s, you get that edition on there. I think even the Blu-ray may have that on there as well as a special feature, so you can flick through it. Obviously, as mentioned, Parker Brothers brought out a board game, and a card game was also produced. But the arcade game came from D. Gottlieb and Company. And of course, Atari also had one as well too. Now it's been released on Laserdisc. I wonder if Kevin's got this one on Laserdisc. That'd be interesting.
Not. He's probably going to start searching for it now.
Nice, yeah. Our VHS and Betamax. Obviously, if you get the Betamax, it's a much better copy. And DVD. And now There is a new edition which came out here in Australia. I don't know if it's in the US. It's got a brand new cover. We'll put this up with the pod art so you guys can have a look at it. It is absolutely freaking glorious. It's done by an artist as well, so it's a rendition of Krull, and it's basically a heroic pose with the glaive out front and him going like this, holding on a rope or something like that, if I remember right. It is absolutely beautiful. That edition came out last year, so I've got that, and we'll talk about a little bit of that on some of the posts so you guys can maybe find that edition. And if you've got a free region Blu-ray, I'm sure you'll be able to pick that up too. And of course, they've corrected the pictures ratio on there too, which was not quite done right on the last release. So where does this film really come from in its heart? What is it really? Really, it's King Arthur. That's what it is. The glaive itself is standing in the place of Excalibur in the Arthurian legend. That's what it really is.
Yeah, well, I mean, then there's so many of these films that are a ripoff of King Arthur or adapted from King Arthur. But yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of trying to capture sci-fi elements of Star Wars in this. There's so many things, and I mean, it's just unfortunately for at the time when Krull came out, it kind of became a cardboard cutout film.
Yeah,
I think people look back. I think people look back at it now with a different feel towards it, knowing how things were made back then. But at the time, it just felt like this is just another cardboard cutout Star Wars wannabe.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think a lot of it falls down. Even Princess Bride has echoes of this, a little bit lighter in tone, obviously, and even Dark Crystal to some extent. It has that sort of a journey quest. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's Star Wars.
You always have the hero. It's the classic hero's quest.
It's Joey Campbell, good old Joey. Yo. Now, gotta say, we have to now review this on the Hallenbach scale, which is, how is it? Out of your finger scale. That's right. So I'm going to give this a 4.5 because, as you mentioned, the ending needed a little bit more work. But that's it. That's where it's sitting for me, mate. 4.5.
I'm going to put this at a 4. I think the ending takes away a little bit more from me, and there's some elements of it, while very good, there's some elements that just do not hold up well over time either.
That's right. So that's where it is, folks. And like I said, have a look at the pod art, good, and maybe have a look on Amazon or whatever service you can find over there in the States. It's too bad you don't have JB Hi-Fi. But you'll be able to find one of those copies of the new one out there. And it's worth it for the art alone. And the print is really, really good too. There's also a new DVD one out there, but it's basic. There's no features or anything like that too. So a new commentary, I believe, too, if I remember right.
Interesting.
So which is interesting. Yeah, which is great. So, folks, thank you very much for joining us here on, of course, the Lee the Mullet podcast. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Time Guardians is only around the corner here, and that is a film that not a lot of people have seen in the US. And, of course, it has Carrie Fisher and the man from Snowy River, Tom Burlinson. Who the hell is that? A lot of people saying, who the hell is that? And that's of course, the one that had Kirk Douglas in it. He came out for his holiday here in Australia. You guys are doing a crazy horse movie up in the mountains? I might go up and see that. And, of course, Tom was the guy racing up mountains like this with a horse. And guess what? They were Clydesdales.
Interesting.
Yeah, but anyway, he did a Terminator-like knockoff that was filmed in South Australia, where they did Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, same area. So it is interesting film. It's a bit of an 80s fest. It's a bit retro, but there is some good designs. And Dean Stockwell rocks up. That's right, the Doctor from Dune.
Or if Dean Stockwell shows up, that means Scott Bakula is going to show up at any point.
That's right. It's so true. We've got to do Quantum Leap on here, folks. That's it. We'll do the Navy SEAL episode because that was great.
No, there's so many great episodes of that show. That show is timeless.
It is. But of course, folks, go and check us out on FPN's servers. Over there, you're going to see 70 other episodes to check out. You can also check out all the great work that, of course, Kyle's now doing with the YouTube channel, and now on Pandora, and of course, Apple Music.
Yeah, we're pretty much on every major podcast catcher now, whether you're international or in the States. In the States, like I said, we just got on Pandora. We're on Spotify. We have our YouTube channel. We're on Apple Music. We're on Amazon Music now. We're all over the place. People are getting sick of us, I think.
I think so. But with that, folks, we'll love you and leave you. Go and check it out and leave a comment on the post below here where you've seen the show. And let us know what you want to check out. We've had some great ones lately, like Free Jack as well. Film a lot of people forgotten about and now enjoying yet again because they want to see Victor Vasendik, played by Mick Jagger. That's right, folks. All on Leave the Mullet podcast.
Yeah, the only thing I remember about that movie was Mick Jagger and Emilio Estevez's character being a Formula One driver.
That's right. Not a very good one because he crashed it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Big thanks to Krull for being on the show. Thank you for tonight, buddy.
Always good to be here and always good to be welding the glaive.
Awesome. Glaive it is. Don't forget to check out that YouTube footage of Ken Marshall, folks. We'll catch you next week on the Legal Mullet podcast. Ta-ta.
G'day, folks. Hope you're enjoying the great shows here on the Phantom Podcast Network. Be sure to check out all the great shows that we have on offer and subscribe on the master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. You can check Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast hosted by Kevin the Raider Nerd Riesel and Lee Fillingsis on that platform. You can also check out Culture Clash, which is the weekly look at pop culture hosted by Kevin and Kyle. Couch Potato Theatre. This is a cult classics and guilty pleasure podcast. Also Time Warp, a fandom flashback show. Endzone, a look at the NFL, American football. Also Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, looking at the great films of Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation podcast, a Star Trek and Orville podcast, looking at Discovery and of course Picard, plus the Orville. Also the Hair Metal podcast, looking at the great shows put on by the amazing bands back in the late 80s, their discs, their LPs, everything, all covering the fashion as well. Hosted by Kevin the Raider Nerd Reitzel. You can also check out Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, hosted by Kevin and Dan Hadley, looking at all the eras of Doctor Who. You can also catch out What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, an amazing show looking at Star Wars, hosted by Derek and Scott. And of course, our newest one, the amazing, The Mullet Guild, an offshoot of the Lethal Mullet podcast looking at Frank Herbert's Dune universe. This is like an encyclopedia for Dune, where I take you through and down into the rabbit hole of Frank Herbert's amazing space opera, the sprawling universe which is going to be brought to life by Denis Villeneuve and December 18. You can check out all the shows there. Be sure to also go onto the social platforms on Twitter at FanPod Network. Let us know what you think of the shows and what else you can look at there. You can also check out great articles that we put up to there that we share. Also check out on Instagram and Facebook, Phantom Podcast Network. Be sure to make sure that every Tuesday you check out the great work done by Making Treks as well. A brand new podcast looking at a deep dive of Star Trek hosted by myself, James Semple, and of course the ever popular and amazing writer of Star Trek and Star Wars, Mark Newbold. Go and check it out, folks, and we'll catch you next time here on the Phantom Podcast Network's The Lethal Mullet Podcast. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.